I think Minister Gigaba took a balanced approach in presenting his budget. You start from where you are with the challenges that you are having. For instance, we are saying that the major challenge that you are having is economic growth, and then it translates to a number of other things. For instance, it translates into the shortfall that we are having in revenue collection. Revenue collection is a function of the performance of the economy. As you know, that at the beginning of the year, our forecast was economic growth of 1.3, and that has been revised down to 0.7. Obviously, that will also affect your tax collection. So that's one. So it then puts the whole fiscal balance into a disequilibrium of some sort. As you could see, that the deficit is rising, the debt to GDP ratio is rising. So it's because of the poor economic performance. So he needed to deal with that. With poor economic performance, for instance, you know that once you are having poor economic performance, you have got unemployment. Once you have got unemployment, you have got your tax collection, especially pay as you earn. People who are paying pay as you earn are fewer. You are also talking about company income tax. You know that the reason why they are retrenching is because they are not doing well. So the profitability of these companies also come down. Others are shutting down. So it translates to the public fiscus. So I think the minister then had to put that scenario. But the narrative which is there, which says that the minister didn't come up with the solutions, I don't think that's entirely true. The one major statement he said we need to change course. The deterioration of the fiscus, right, in the midterm in the midterm budget says let's do something now, and started alluding to those things. What are the things that we need to start doing? One of the main things that we need to start doing is to make sure that all as South Africans, we stop this thing of standing on top of the mountains and start throwing stones, trying to find who exactly is going to be a soft target, and we throw stones to that person. There's a role that government should play, and I dare say that government has started and it has been playing its role from the time of the global economic crisis, right? And if you like, the crisis that we're having, although a lot of people wanted to be very myopic and have an amnesia about it, that the crisis and the problems that we're facing today is the crisis which emanates from the global economic crisis, which we then had all of us over the world to suffer. And if I dare say, that emanated from the deregulation of regulation of the industry, especially the financial service sector in the US. So it affected all of us. Why I'm saying that is that from that time, our surplus started decreasing and us getting now into this a debt that we're having. So he's then saying that the responsibility of turning around, it's our responsibility, all of us, government, the private sector, labor, and civil society. Basically, all of us to say, how do we turn around the economy? But as you would know, the responsibility of the government, one is to create conducive climate for investment by doing a number of things, amongst others, the regulation, clarity on policy, but more importantly, our investment on infrastructure investment. And we have been very consistent from 2008, 2009. The government said, let's engage on a counter-cyclical investment. Let's invest in infrastructure. And that we did from that time onwards. It did a number of things. I think this economy could have been in recession many times before the recent recession, were it not for government intervention. We know for a fact that when you do that, for instance, when you spend on infrastructure, it's not government which build roads. It's not government which builds stadia. It's the private sector itself. Yeah. By so doing, we're also saying that we are charting the way. We're also expecting the private sector to come and play its role. centuries of economic disenfranchisement, where the majority of this country were only used to be providers of labor for a few to have the benefits of that. So to say radical economic transformation, therefore, I think it was vulgarizing it. But I must say that I interact with a lot of business people. I think at most they will say, explain exactly what do you mean, right? And there is a quote that the minister quoted from the president, which talks about literally about changing the structure of the economy for the benefit of everybody, broadly, right? So that can't be wrong. That can't be wrong. And there's nobody again who's saying go and smash and grab. So these things we have shown that we do things properly. So I'm then saying that our history, we can't run away from that, of changing and making sure that the majority of the people of this country, the black people and the Africans in particular, also become economic citizens of this country. We are then saying, perhaps the radical part may, one, it may mean that let's do that, let's be quick with doing that. Our people can't always be sitting on the margins and folding their arms and waiting that one day people will say, no, now we can share. But two, unequal societies, it's known as an economic fact, unequal societies are the most unstable societies in the world. And once you have got unstable societies, investments don't want to go in unstable environments. It runs away. So what we are trying to solve, the question of trying to get investment, to crowd in private sector investment, we can't do it to continue and entrench these apartheid legacies. We can't do that. We need to change things. We need to do that different. And we're saying that the state must play its role. That's why the minister spoke about the bill that will soon be presenting, which puts away the question of the Preferential Procurement Act, right? So that we can have an act which is going to be able to talk to the needs of today and allow government and state-owned enterprises to use the budget lever, to use the fiscus, to use government procurement to also crowd in, to allow black people to also realize their talents, to also realize their potential, so that they contribute to the growth of this country. Dealing with the governance issue is one thing. I want to talk about SAA because it has been very topical. People say, why recapitalize? You know, there's a reason why you, in the first place, you have got state-owned companies. They play a role more than the profit, just providing profit to shareholders. They've got a developmental mandate amongst other things, which can be explained very, very broadly. In our country, for instance, South African Airways also plays a very big role as far as tourism is concerned. But for a company like South African Airways, which had debts of about 17 billion before our recapitalization, if we didn't come to the party, would have been expected, because we are a guarantor as government of the debt of South African Airways, would have been expected to chip in with the 19 billion rand at one go. But more than that, there was going to be a trigger effect where other lenders, not just at SA but at other institutions, other SOCs will also be calling for their money, and it was not going to stop at that. The lenders of the South African government would say, we don't trust this government that it can pay its debt. So we're having a debt which is over 2 trillion rand, and they'll say we want our money back. So when we look at these things, we've got a macro picture. We do take very, very painful decision. But let me also hasten to say, contrary to the to the narrative out there, which says that the previous board, and especially the chair of South African Airways, to me was a problem at SAA. That's not true. In fact, now we know some of the things which are wrong at South African Airways, right? We know, for instance, now that of the 24 billion rand procurement spend, right, only about 400 million rand, if my memory serves me well, is being spent on PE companies. That can't be right. If you listened to the minister yesterday saying transformation and economic growth are not mutually exclusive. Those two things, they must work with each other. There's a question of evergreen contracts at South African Airways. Just on that alone, we don't think if you have got an ever contract that the company is getting the value that it's supposed to get from there. So we're then saying putting up all these things together will be able to get the efficiencies that you want from South African Airways. One very other important thing which came up from the minister's mini budget yesterday is the question of getting a strategic equity partner that opens up the participation of the private sector, so that we can share both the upside and the downside. For instance, if we had an equity partner and we're expected to recapitalize, both shareholders, the government and the private company would have recapitalized, paid its portion of recapitalization to the company. So we must also share the downside. But we also believe that by so doing, apart from crowding in private sector money, we are also crowding in private sector expertise. We are also crowding in private sector aviation expertise to try and help and deal with the problem there. Another problem which we are having, and the minister couldn't, but he had to deal with it. There is a problem. Eskom. Everybody at Eskom is acting, having an acting chair, having an acting CEO, acting CO. It creates its own problem. It just says to somebody who's having his or her money there that there's no stability there. And the minister was very bold and representing. By the way, the budget is the collection. It's what the cabinet would have agreed upon. So it's what they've been discussed. He said, as a matter of agents, one, National Treasury should work with the Department of Public Enterprises to look at the governance and financial management at Eskom. Two, the question of making sure that there is a new board, and it did say that they will be working towards having a new board, a permanent board, permanent chair at Eskom by the end of November, so that that board can be told that it must work as a matter of agency on trying to get a permanent CEO and finalize every other thing which may be on the way of finalizing other positions. But you can't have a company like Eskom, which plays such a critical role in the economy of the country, being in this situation where everybody else acts. But I think we as government are quite exposed at Eskom, because we guarantee the debt of Eskom, which is over 200 billion rand as it were now. So we are guarantors of that. If Eskom can't pay, then it means it's our contingent. That's our contingent liability. So as National Treasury, as the custodians of financial resources of the country's purse, then we have got a responsibility to make sure that you don't endanger the fiscus of the country, which will pull a lot of us with if it was allowed to go down. You would have heard the ministers talking about his interaction and what their interaction with Minister Gogile Gwinte, which talks to that, right? That what's happening there, we know that there's a role of agriculture and so on. The minister doesn't have a choice, by the way, when it comes to radical economic transformation. That's the policy of the ruling party, right? The question of land redistribution and so on is also the policy of the ruling party. So me and the minister, we don't have a choice. We are there, we are deployees, and we must implement ANC policy. So there shouldn't be any apprehension about that, right? It needs to happen. The Land Act of 1913 and the Land Act of 1936 took land away from people, and we need to correct that. By the way, talking about radical economic transformation, it's not only the South African business that we talk to about this thing. Even when we talk to international investors and potential investors, they raise this issue, and we explain it, where it comes from and why it must happen. and they agree with us that that's what should happen, that it's not just a political imperative to redress this inequality, right? It's a business imperative. How do you do business when you have got so many people who can't afford to buy your products because they are out of jobs? They can't involve or help with the process of reigniting the economy. So it's although it is a political imperative, but more than anything else, it's even good for the investors themselves that they've got everybody participating so that their products can be bought, or they can also help with the question of innovation and creating more jobs. I don't know, this morning I was in a business report, a breakfast show, and there was former Ambassador Dooley who said to us, I listened to the minister's speech. What I liked with the minister's speech is that he didn't sugarcoat it, right? He says he identified problems very well to us, and we know where the problems are, but that also gives us an opportunity to come and invest. And he says next week, I'm here, I'm going to announce we'll be coming with investors of about $1 billion investing in the South African economy, which means with the current exchange rate, we are talking of anything above a 14 billion rand investment. But says next week he's doing that. It shows that it helps, and it's important that we should be candid about things, about what we have and so on, but at the same time say, here are the opportunities. As you would know, that hardships also open opportunities. Risks also open opportunities for people who want to make a difference. We, as a matter of fact, we've spoken with the 3 rating agencies since after the budget. The last one was at 7 o'clock this morning. All what I can tell you, they've asked us questions. We've told them. They do raise their concerns. They say, you are breaching the expenditure ceiling, and we're saying wait until we come to the end of the year. They are concerned about the deficit, which is increasing. You know, those are the things that they look at. I think those things are important. They are necessary, but not sufficient conditions. I think at the end of the day, when we balance those things, we should see development at the end of the day. But these are the issues that they are raising, and we've been able to respond to them. That look, we're not on 60% debt to GDP ratio. All what we're saying is that if we don't do anything about that, right? If we don't do anything right, that's where we may end up. So we can't be judged on the 60% debt to GDP ratio. Let's be judged on what we have. But again, we're then saying there are measures that we are taking between now and the end of the financial year, or perhaps between now and the budget. So there will be things that the minister will be announcing that will be coming from SONA, which will show that 1, 2, 3 we've done, and say these are the things which are coming up. So it gave us an opportunity to interact with them. They are here next week. We'll continue with the interaction. Look, they are in America. We're here. We also have got an opportunity to say here's the problem, but that's how we intend solving it. Here are the building blocks that we have put. But we also know that we need to interact with our with the business community in South Africa to say let's work together. The minister did point to certain things that we're already doing with business, but we say we have an opportunity of doing more. When the people of South Africa, the majority of this country, said to the apartheid government, invest in human capital in those years, the Nationalist Party government decided only that it was going to only invest in a very tiny minority, plus minus 5% at the time of our population. Right? That's what they decided. When you invest for the future. The reality that we must also face, as we are busy blaming the ANC government about these things, these are the seats that were sown by the Nationalist Party over the years and being voted to power time and again. So the legacy of apartheid is still with us today. These are the bitter fruits that we are reaping today. We had the majority of the people of this country not being invested in, right? Given a substandard education. Hendrik Verwoerd said, there is no use to teach an African child, called us Bantu at the time, mathematics. And today we know that we have got such a backlog in mathematics and sciences. So you need those things evolve. They evolve with the society. So I've got a huge backlog. So the economy needs those skills, and it can't just overnight be solved. There are those who will say that forget about the past. I so much want to forget about the past, but it's with us now that the majority of the people of this country don't have access to the resources to harness the economy and to provide employment opportunities. So that's why the minister, in his attempt to say what we need to do, he said, amongst others, the government, the things that we are doing and we have been doing, we continue to invest in infrastructure. In the MTF, as things are, we are investing over 900 billion rand. To say again, we see infrastructure spend as very important to make sure that when private sector comes in, I always say infrastructure is an input to private sector. When private sector comes in, then you've got this infrastructure. But the fact of the matter is, gross capital formation for the past 3 years has been decreasing. It's a fallacy to think that government acting alone can jumpstart the economy, can reignite the economy. It can't happen. It's a fallacy. It's myth. So we're then saying the owners of capital, right? The owners of capital should also come and play their role. As you know, that the Minister of Finance and Government in general, on an ongoing basis, we do have our meetings, deal with the issues that the private sector is saying we need to deal with for them to be able to invest. It's not about my thoughts. It's about the position of the government. It's about the state of the economy. It's about what the minister as the Minister of Finance has said before. One, that we know that nuclear is part of our energy solution, our energy strategy. That's there. We have said that many times. But again, we have said that as things stand now, we do have excess capacity as far as electricity is concerned. But another reality again is that, as we're saying, that the fiscus is under considerable strain. We spoke about that as the indebtedness of the country. So two things: when it's needed and when the country can afford it. Right? We have always said from the first day that we can't spend money that we don't have or we can't afford to where we've got a debt to service that. And I think we're reaching that. But the nuclear thing, you don't just you can't start nuclear this year. I think there's so much planning which goes with it, right? There's so much planning which must go with it, and it should be influenced by a number of other factors. But I think the position says that we can't spend money that we don't have, and we don't have pressure, as it were, since we've got excess electricity. We've just invested on a number of other new power stations, and I think we need to sweat those assets for us to make sure that we get the electricity that the country and the region need. So this is the position that I know, and we can't spend money that we don't have. I think that's we have said that from the first day, and it's the line that we continue following. Let me talk about the question of the question of monopolies, the question of oligopolies and duopolies. There's known that those things are known to be market failure, right? So that talks to the over-concentration of the economy, few monopolizing or dominating the economy. Even if you use neoclassical economics, they say this market failure. So you can't allow that. Yeah? So you want to get as many players as possible. For instance, one of the problems of oligopolies is that they can collude to overcharge you. You'll be paying something which is more than the market price, and we've seen that. For instance, I think we've got the question of the construction of our stadium, because there were just a few of them, and they were able to collude, and the state ended up paying huge monies. People who rob us billions and billions of rand through collusion, they pay their way out. That can't be justice. That can't be justice. And you find that South Africans are very mute when it comes to the condemnation of corruption in the private sector. There are many other more complicated schemes of corruption. For instance, your illicit financial flow, your transfer pricing, base erosion and profit shifting. Again, those are complicated schemes that private sector get into, or let me say, some companies in the private sector get into. We have got very responsible private sector citizens, but those which do that, they must be called to order, and we must make sure that they face the music. So what I'm trying to say, let's not be mute as South African as far as corruption is concerned. Let's be equitable. Let's denounce it. Let everyone who has been found with his hand in a cookie jar face the consequences. But at the same time, it's very important that I don't just make an allegation against you. An allegation is an allegation. It should be proven. Because in this country, what you also find, if I just don't like you, I'll say you are just corrupt, and I expect the law enforcement agencies to get you to jail. We've got courts, which we know, they're our own creation, they're a creation of our constitution. We've got prosecuting authority, we've got police. Those people must be allowed to do their work. Sometimes I find that we decide that we want to be cops, want to be prosecuting authority, we also want to be judges, we ourselves. Let's allow those people to do their work. The fact that I don't like you or don't like me, let it not that be enough to say then therefore I must be arrested. I just make an allegation and then the law enforcement agencies should run after me. But we should make sure that those cases are being investigated, and if somebody is taken to court, and if somebody is found guilty, let's make sure that they face the consequences.